I never imagined being called just a waiter would lead to a heartbreaking TV moment. I will never forget the day everything fell apart. The sun punctured through the clouds, casting a warm glow on the restaurant's patio, but I felt a chill dance along my spine. I was just a waiter. Just a part of the background, lost between plates of pasta and glasses of wine. Yet that day, I'd be thrust into the spotlight of my own life in ways I never could have anticipated. My hands trembled as I approached the table where a couple sat, their laughter ringing through the air like a broken melody. I recognized them instantly. They were regulars, Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, the picture-perfect couple who radiated happiness. The way they held each other's gaze made my heart ache for the love I hadn't found yet. I could hear the clinking of silverware, the faint hum of conversations, but my world narrowed down to their laughter. Just as I set down their meal, a loud crash echoed behind me. A bottle of wine shattered, splintering into 1,000 tiny shards on the floor. My heart raced. I turned to see a frantic kitchen staff moving, yelling for help. The urgency clawed at my throat, a tightness in my chest. Something was wrong. My instincts screamed at me to go help, yet here I was, stuck at the table, frozen in indecision. I felt the weight of the world pressing down on my shoulders, mixed with a growing dread. As I glanced back at Mr. Thompson, his eyes flickered past me, suddenly wide with a mix of panic and something darker. A low murmur swept through the restaurant. I caught snippets of conversations, words like fire and evacuate. The collective tension filled the air, thick and suffocating. I could taste the fear on my lips. Then, in a whirlwind of chaos, the front doors burst open. A woman rushed in, her face pale, eyes wild. My breath hitched. She shouted something incomprehensible, and suddenly, it all fell into focus. I noticed a man behind her, his expression blank, staring into the distance, as if the world around him had faded. I felt my heart clench, a visceral response to an unseen tragedy. I caught a flash of movement. Mrs. Thompson's hand grabbed my wrist, her nails digging into my skin. "You need to get help," she urged, desperation lacing her voice. I blinked, feeling the gravity of the moment. I suddenly knew this wasn't just a routine dinner service. This was a turning point, a sudden twist in the ordinary. What would it take to change everything? I didn't know. I only felt the surge of adrenaline, the instinct to do something as the room spun around me. Shadows danced on the walls, mingling with flickers of fear. I wanted to run to help, but I felt paralyzed by the unknown. Then, like an electric jolt, a realization hit me. The woman with the frantic eyes and the distant man. What if there was more to their story? When the sirens began to wail in the distance, I had a choice to make. Would I stay a mere observer, just a waiter, or would I dive deep into the chaos and uncover the truth? Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The sirens wailed closer, urgency mixing with the chilling confusion in the restaurant. My heart pounded like a drum, drowning out the chaos, but one voice cut through, a shaky whisper clawing for attention. It was Mrs. Thompson, her grip unyielding as if I might vanish into thin air. "Please, don't just stand there. We can't wait for someone else," she pleaded, her eyes wide pools of fear and determination. It struck me that this woman, so accustomed to a life of luxury and ease, was in this moment as vulnerable as I was. Without a second thought, I nodded, my instincts kicking in. I glanced at the rear exit, a path leading me through a maze of tables and the impending smoke that seemed to curl around us like tendrils of fate. "Okay, it'll help. Just stay close." The moment I turned, the adrenaline surged through me, a flicker of hope igniting in the pit of despair. We darted towards the woman with the pale face, her companion now rooted to the spot, as if he had become stone amidst the chaos. I hadn't a clue what had unfolded, but I could feel a growing network of despair coiling around us, suffocating my thoughts. "Ma'am, what's happening?" I shouted, my voice cutting through the noise. "My brother, he's trapped inside," the woman cried, her voice cracking like glass. "He didn't come out when we warned everyone. You have to help me." A flash of recognition swept over me as her words registered, they clawed at the edges of my heart. I thought of my own brother, of the playful banter we shared, and my pulse quickened. The thought of someone being left behind was unbearable, but there was also dread. I scanned the crowd, noticing the panic resonating in their eyes, families huddled together, hoping for the safety of those they loved. Time felt slippery, like a wild race against a ticking clock. "Stay here," I shouted to Mrs. Thompson and her husband, who remained frozen in shock. "Call 911 and let them know we have someone inside." Without waiting for an answer, I dashed toward the exit. I had never been the type to take risks or leap without looking, but fear for the woman's brother pulled me forward. The restaurant was thick with smoke now, every breath a battle. As I pushed the door open, my heart sank at the sight of the flames licking the edges of the building, devouring everything in their path. My instincts urged me to retreat, but I steeled my resolve. "For her brother," I whispered to myself, grit forming behind my teeth. That I stepped back, taking in the layout. Shadows danced, revealing glimpses of the kitchen staff evacuating, but the door to the storage room, a spot I had accessed countless times before, stood ajar. I sprinted through the chaos, hoping that he would be there. "Hello," I called out, my voice raw. "Is anyone in here? Please, if you can hear me, say something." The heat intensified, and doubt began to gnaw at my courage. Then, a weak voice broke through the crackling flames, faint but undeniable. "Help, I can't get out." It was a man, disoriented, scared. I took a mental step forward despite the heat swelling around me. "I'm coming. Just hold on." The sight of him dispelled the dread momentarily. He was crouched behind bags of flour and boxes, his face a mask of confusion and fear. I edged closer, choking back the smoke filling the air, grabbing his arm with urgency. "We have to get out of here," and just as I was about to pull him free, a loud roar of flames erupted nearby, the wall cracking as if the building itself protested my actions. "Go. I'll get you out," I yelled, urging him to do just that. When he didn't move, my heart raced. I couldn't lose both of us. I reached for him again, but before I could pull him closer, the wall nearest to us buckled, and flames erupted like a beast awoken from years of slumber. "Move," I shouted, adrenaline pushing me further as I felt the heat engulf me. I couldn't think, just act. I twisted, wrapping an arm around his waist as the heat scavenged our surroundings. Together, we lunged toward the exit. That we broke through the door just as the inferno swallowed behind us, stumbling into the air that tasted like freedom. A mixed blessing smudged by the weight of fear and uncertainty. As we collapsed on the ground outside, I gasped for air, the cool night breaking the fevered haze. The sirens blared louder, but something nagged in my chest. What about the Thompsons? What if they hadn't managed to escape? The frantic woman knelt beside us, frantically shaking her brother. "Alex!" she cried, tears streaming down her face as she cradled his head in her lap. Behind them, chaos reigned, but my heart still pulsed with dread for the Thompson couple, whose laughter had echoed just moments before. That I needed to know. My palms were sweaty, and doubt clawed at me. Would I still be just a waiter, or had I stepped firmly into the tangled web of someone else's tragedy? Before I could catch my breath, a shadow loomed beside me. I glanced up, my heart lurching as Mr. Thompson appeared, soot-streaked and hollow-eyed alone. "Have you seen?" He stopped, horror flickering across his features as hope evaporated in the cold grip of night. "Where's my wife?" Reality hit like a punch to the gut. My words tangled in my throat, and I could only stare as his fear mirrored the anguish building within me. The air was thick with tension, a mix of desperation and chaos swirling together under the bright lights of the emergency vehicles as they descended upon the scene. I barely registered the cries, the hasty footfalls, the urgency infused in every siren that cut through the still night. All I could focus on was the devastation etched into Mr. Thompson's face as he frantically searched for his wife in the swirling mass of chaos surrounding us. That I am sorry, too, thought she was right behind you. I stumbled over the words, guilt and fear coiling tightly in my chest. How could I have seen him and not realized she was missing? The thought gnawed at my insides, each second weighing heavier than the last. Damn it! He shouted, his voice a tempest of emotion. She was right there. I couldn't stand watching him spiral. Needed to channel his fear into action. Let's find her. We can't just stay here. My own heart felt like it would tear apart, but I couldn't afford to feel that now. Not when there was still hope. He looked at me with glassy eyes, flickering between disbelief and something akin to determination. You went in there. If you went in, then maybe she'll be okay, I urged, desperation bleeding into my tone. There was something within those words that felt like a promise, but it was only hollow hope echoed back at me. We joined forces, searching the gathering crowd. Each face, each anguished expression added layers to the wall of anxiety closing in around us. The lingering shadows of smoke curled like spirits over the wreckage of what had once been a lively restaurant, now a monument of despair. As we scoured the area, I caught sight of a few firefighters, their movements slick with practiced urgency. One of them caught my eye, lifting his helmet for a moment. We're doing what we can. Please remain calm, he shouted, but his face betrayed the fatigue behind the bravado. It was small moments like these, reminders of human resilience, that sparked a flicker of hope in me. Excuse me. I called out to him, my voice shaky yet insistent. We think there are still people inside. A woman, her name is Linda Thompson. The firefighter shifted his attention, his brow furrowing with immediate concern. We'll get to them. I promise. But we need to assess the situation first. It's dangerous. No. The raw edge to Mr. Thompson's voice made my chest ache. You don't understand. My wife, she would wait, she wouldn't leave. She's scared. I saw the firefighter's expression shift, empathy cutting through the stress. He nodded, his resolve growing heavier. Stay back. I'll send someone to help. As he turned toward his colleagues, I felt a wave of dread wash over me. What if they didn't find her? What if we were too late? I could feel Mr. Thompson's anguish piercing through the air like a blade, and I couldn't help but put a gentle hand on his back, an attempt to steady him. She's strong, I said, needing to believe it as much as he did. We'll find her. Our search seemed endless, each moment dragging into a painful eternity. I caught glimpses of the Thompsons' world and fleeting memories, their laughter in the midst of a busy evening, their tender arguments over small matters, love woven through their every exchange. My heart broke with the realization that, in pursuit of our own happiness, we often fail to fully appreciate the fragility of life. Do you really think she's in there? Mr. Thompson suddenly asked, tears brimming in his eyes, voice cracking beneath the weight of his fear. Yes. I replied, perhaps too hastily, desperate to infuse even a sliver of hope into his shattered spirit. We will find her. She's waiting for you. Remember how you both laughed at that joke you told? She feels safe with you. Shell, hold on. The minutes blurred like falling sand in an hourglass, slipping through our fingers. And every second felt like an eternity. I could see the flicker of hope dimming in Mr. Thompson's eyes, but there was something else, a flicker of resilience igniting a fire beneath his despair. Suddenly, he grabbed my arm, his face resolute. We need to go back in. No. I gasped, a fresh wave of panic gripping me. That's too dangerous, you could get hurt, but he was already shaking his head, a fierce determination burning through the haze of despair. I can't stand by and do nothing. I won't lose her. Just as I opened my mouth to argue, I caught sight of a familiar figure weaving through the crowd. Mrs. Thompson, or the illusion of her at least. In a moment of surreal clarity, I turned, and my heart dropped. A woman tumbled from the shadows, disheveled but alive. "Linda!" Mr. Thompson shouted, and I could hardly breathe as he raced toward her, this beacon of hope, emerging from the depths of darkness. But before joy could blossom, I saw the sudden change on her face as she reached for him. Behind her lurked something dreadful, a furious swirl of embers and dread, casting shadows where light should dwell. "Where's Alex?" she gasped, sputtering out the words as if they clawed their way out against a tide of heat and fear. Hope fractured once more, bursting like a fragile bubble, leaving behind raw, endless despair. "Alex is still inside." Time slipped away again, each passing second heavier than the last, and suddenly everything felt unreadable, topsy-turvy. The reality of their situation hit us all like a tidal wave. Her brother alone in the flames wherever he was hiding, the absence tugged violently at the edges of our hearts. A choice loomed before us, a haunting presence heralding what it meant to love and to endure. But could I brave the fire again? Everything around us seemed to blur as panic gripped my heart. The air thickened, a cocktail of smoke and apprehension clouding my thoughts. Mr. and Mrs. Thompson had been painted by tragedy, each brushstroke a reminder of how easily love could be swallowed by chaos. The flicker of hope I once held faded beneath their fear, a palpable thing, pressing desperately against my chest. "Alex is inside?" Mr. Thompson's voice shattered, echoed by a rough tremor. He didn't wait for an answer. With a resolve that belied the fear seeping into his bones, he spun away from Linda, eyes gleaming with urgency. "I'm going in, no," I pleaded, adrenaline surging through my veins. I reached out for him, desperate to push him toward safety. "You can't. It's too dangerous," but Mr. Thompson's gaze was unfaltering, a torrent of emotions coursing through him. "I won't leave him behind. I can't." "Wait," I blurted, my voice cracking. "You don't even know where he is." Yet, as my protests faded into the cacophony of agonized shouts and sirens, I could feel the gravity of their family's bond, the instinct to protect bowing to something deeper than reason. In a heartbeat, decisions unfolded like petals in the suffocating heat of the moment. Before I could compute the whirlwind of thoughts racing through my mind, something much stronger than fear took hold of me, an aching determination to help them. "Then I'm coming with you," I declared, my own voice thick with fear yet laced with certainty. Mrs. Thompson shuffled forward, a phantom of strength crumbling at the edges. "You don't have to do this," she whispered, haunted by guilt and despair. But the urgency behind her vulnerability only fueled my resolve. "Someone has to go. If we wait, we might lose him," I replied, even as dread clawed at the back of my throat. Ratty clothes clinging to my skin, I joined Mr. Thompson as he charged forward, though part of me screamed in protest. But this wasn't about might, was about Alex, another thread of their family tapestry, caught amid the embers and darkness. "Stay close," Mr. Thompson shouted, his voice a fierce echo against the isolating din of flames and despair as we pushed through the boundary of light and shadow, stumbling toward the wreckage. Fear clutched at me, hot and spiraling, every step sent electric jolts through my legs. Inside, the air thickened with more than just smoky, it was laced with the promise of loss. The jagged remains of the restaurant unfolded like a grotesque storybook, each corner hiding remnants of unshared laughter and blossoming memories. My heart raced as the reality of our search mingled with every psychic crack in the air, whispering the ghosts of laughter now silenced. "Alex, are you here?" Mr. Thompson yelled, his voice a frayed thread holding us together. I joined in, echoing his calls like a frantic prayer to the universe, praying for signs, for miracles hidden within the ashes wrapping around us. That we pressed deeper, weaving through ruins, when suddenly I caught a shimmer of something, a flash of yellow hanging flacidly, glistening amid the wreckage like a beacon. It was a firefighter's helmet lying at an awkward angle, and an icy jolt rushed down my spine, gut-wrenching and heavy with foreboding. "Is that?" I barely breathed the words, my pulse quickening. "God, no," Mr. Thompson whispered, and a flicker of despair tight as a noose tightened around his throat. "Stay strong," I urged, forcing the words past my trembling lips, though my heart felt heavier with each passing moment. "Alex needs us." We pressed on, and soon the suffocating embrace of smoke cleared. In an eerie silence that felt far too heavy to bear, I caught sight of a movement amid the twisted metal and debris. My heart leaped, a fluttering ember reigniting, but as I blinked to focus, I froze there, legs pinned beneath a fallen beam, hunched frail and lost, was a figure gasping for breath, Alex. Mr. Thompson's voice tore from him like a prayer, reverberating through the terror. In an instant, familial instinct raged back to life as he scrambled, desperately trying to lift the weight off his son. "Help him. Please. Someone come." I screamed, only to remember the isolation pressing around us, the harassment of silence. Our cries echoed uselessly into the cavernous shell. Only the shadows bore witness to our despair, but through the folds of dread, I felt a flicker of warmth appear beside me. A firefighter, face grim but eyes alight with a glimmer of resolution, knelt beside us. "I'm here," he declared, eager hands joining Mr. Thompson's in the desperate struggle to free Alex. With every ounce of strength, they worked as my heart raced, caught between hope and fear. I clutched my breath, urging with everything within me for Alex to hold on, to fight through the agony sapping the life from him. As the beam shifted, I saw for the first time the silhouette of Alex, dazed but alive, the storm of disbelief clashing against the reality of his frail frame. In that moment of raw anguish, I felt the weight of the world in every ache, every pulse, but it was as I watched Alex being freed, gasping for breath amidst the chaos, that something shifted within the atmosphere, a sensation that urged my gut to churn with uncertainty. "I love you, buddy," Mr. Thompson murmured through gritted teeth, tears spilling freely now. And then, as Alex's eyes fluttered open, confusion heavy in his expression, the world pivoted once more, a haunting wail pierced the smoky air, rising like a vengeful chant from the depths of grief. Then everything ignited, the shockwave of destruction rippled outward, an all-consuming force that left me reeling. My world splintered. Amidst the chaos, I caught the frozen gaze of Mrs. Thompson standing far off outside the wreckage, hand clutched instinctively at her chest, and knowing agony spread across her features, nestled deep under the fear. And just like that, everything shattered, leaving behind echoes of what once was and what could still be, universe in the infinite teetering of love and loss. The acrid bite of smoke lingered in the air as the world seemed to collapse around me, a disorienting whirl that spun between the warmth of hope and the icy grip of despair. The moments dragged on, crushed beneath the weight of our desperate fight as the walls of the universe shrank to a singular focus. Alex, that I, and the aftermath of the explosion, sounds blurred together, a cacophony of sirens, scattered cries, and the cracked breath of those trapped between peril and panic. The air felt electric with emotion, each thread weaving a tapestry of fear and longing that held us prisoner just as the wreckage held Alex. "Get him out." My voice trembled as I grabbed a corner of the beam that had pinned him, joining the firefighter and Mr. Thompson in their frantic efforts. Together, we heaved with a rawness that came from somewhere deep within, fueled by every prayer whispered from the edges of my heart. With each shift, every agonizing inch closer to freedom sent shockwaves of hope cascading through me. Alex's face came into clearer view as the smoke began to clear, bruised, bloodied, but undeniably alive. His wide, glassy eyes met mine, brimming with confusion and fear. "Stay with me, Alex. You're not alone," I yelled, desperate to tether him to consciousness. He blinked slowly, somehow trying to connect to the world around him despite the groans of debris. "Help," he croaked, the sound sending despair rippling through me. "Keep fighting, buddy. We're almost there." The firefighter urged as we redoubled our efforts, adrenaline buzzing at the edges of my awareness. Then suddenly, the unthinkable happened. A low rumble thundered through the wreckage, an ominous warning that pulled at my instincts to retreat. I glanced back at the exit, where streaks of orange light danced, mocking us with the insatiable hunger that had consumed everything familiar. "Oh, God, we need to move!" I shouted, panic spiraling as I scanned the charred walls around us, the weight of impending doom pushing against my chest. "Just a little longer." Mr. Thompson grunted through gritted teeth, veins standing out on his neck and sweat rolling down his brow, the relentless father rising in defiance of fate. A moment stretched, a fragile thread binding us together, then with one final heave, the beam rolled aside, and Alex was free, collapsing into his father's arms like a fragile bird released from a cage. Alex. Mr. Thompson choked out, a sound layered with relief and grief, their long-lost bond trying to forge through the chaos that had engulfed them, but just as victory bloomed, fate turned once again, reminding us of its cruel nature. A deafening crack echoed like the tolling of a bell, signaling the ceiling above us buckling under its own weight. The world tilted as chunks of plaster began to rain down, and in an instant, we were thrown from our fragile sanctuary. No. I screamed, reaching for them, but the world spun in slow motion. A warped vision of family was obscured by smoke as I stumbled backward, the gargantuan rubble creeping closer to sealing off our very existence. Through the chaos, I felt something, a pair of strong arms lifting me, guiding me away from the impending collapse. It was the firefighter, desperately maneuvering, his face showing the same fierce determination I had seen in Mr. Thompson. Together, we fled into the uncertain grasp of the outside world, leaving behind the shadows of tragedy while still clinging to the hope of life, but reassurance was a fleeting ship, and as I halted at the edge of the wreckage, breathless and gasping in the dim glow of the chaos, I turned just in time to see Mr. Thompson struggling to lift Alex, disoriented yet alive, but now teetering on the precipice of salvation as another tremor shook the ground. All at once, a colossal beam fell, its jagged edge slicing through the air like a predator, direct toward them. Time stalled, unraveling like a frayed rope tethered only by hope and desperation. No. I lunged forward, adrenaline propelling me past the overwhelming fear that threatened to swallow me whole. But just as I reached them, something unexpected happened. The firefighter returned. His powerful frame soared into the air, arms outstretched, and with one stab of pure courage, he collided with Alex and Mr. Thompson, pushing them just to the side as the timber crashed to the ground. The impact sent me skidding back, landing hard against the rubble, and for a moment, I lost sight of them amidst the dust cloud that erupted in arches of despair. It settled like a heavy fog, and as I regained my bearings and pushed myself back to my feet, the choking truth almost tore me down. The heroic firefighter lay beneath the wreckage, the weight of the beam pinning him to the ground. No. Get up! I cried out, the words slipping through my fingers like water against the shore of reality, desperately echoing back into the realm of impossibility, and it was thin. A flicker of light bounced through the chaos, illuminating the heart of darkness that had reigned too long. A stranger appeared from among the destruction, eyes locked on the fallen hero amid the wreckage. With a swiftness fueled by the instinct to save life where it could still breathe, he rushed forward, yet just as everything seemed full of terrible possibilities, I caught a glimpse of Mrs. Thompson, still rooted by the abyss as realization pooled heavily in her eyes. The world around us moved in slow syncopation, but her expression shattered every inch of my heart as her pulse seemed to synchronize with the journey between life and death she had already walked too many times before. In the panic and tumult, I felt a tremble within me, a familiar, disarming emotional undertow that pulled at the very fabric of our humanity. Here, in the heart of this inferno, surrounded by courage and fear, love and loss, I was left holding on to the fraying edges of everything I had believed. Save him, please, the words fled from my lips, but as I faced the moment of reckoning, the ground rumbling beneath us once more, I realized the finality of it all. I don't know what awaited in the shadows, and as I looked back toward the fallen firefighter, my world split open, laying bare the raw, aching truth. Nothing, not even the strongest will, would shield us from the waiting sorrow of what was to come. And in that heartbeat, the light faded, leaving us stranded in the heavy embrace of darkness, the pain of love and loss forever intertwined in this desperate, electric chaos. The air was thick with uncertainty, a palpable dread washing over me like waves crashing on an unforgiving shore. I stood frozen, mouth agape, as the shadows of surrender loomed closer, where the echoes of heroism mingled with the cries of anguish. The firefighter had risked everything, and I was left wrestling with the specter of his sacrifice, one act reverberating through a reality that seemed far removed from any semblance of hope. In the distance, flames licked the sky like twisted tongues, mocking our desperation for resolution. I couldn't shake the image of Mrs. Thompson's anguish, her face a mask of disbelief that haunted my thoughts, drawing me into a whirlpool of conflicting emotions. We had barely saved Alex, saving the brave soul who had saved him from tragedy felt insurmountable. As the chaos swirled around, memetics pushing past, the sirens blaring a soundtrack of pain, I felt a hand on my shoulder. Startled, I turned to find Jenna, my friend from the diner, with wide eyes filled with horror and concern. She had arrived moments ago, leaving her shift to come here, summoned by an unspoken bond of friendship that transcended words. There's so much going on. You need to breathe, she said, her voice steady amidst the tumult, grounding me in a way that felt achingly soft. After the rush of adrenaline faded, I realized how much I yearned for that connection, a slender straw to clutch as I teetered on the precipice of despair. That I can't, I responded, the words escaping in a breathy gasp as I motioned to the smoldering wreckage. They might still be alive. We need to help them. You need to take care of yourself too, Jenna urged, pulling me aside from the disarray, leading me to a patch of solace where the din faded slightly. Remember, they're not just fighting for themselves. They need you to be okay. In that moment, I glanced back at the fire-ravaged scene, a small pocket of chaos eclipsed by the looming uncertainty. Tears stung my eyes as I wrestled with the emotion bubbling just beneath the surface. Jenna squeezed my shoulder, offering a gesture of comfort, and I could almost believe that strength could guard against the heartache surrounding us. Hold on, yeah. Jenna's voice was a soft anchor, but I could feel the tremors beneath the surface of her own calm demeanor. We're all in this together. Just then, as if the universe sought to remind us not all was lost, a low murmur began to rise through the crowd. People were talking with urgency, gesturing toward the epicenter of our anguish. My heart raced again, a fresh jolt of hope surging as I observed the medics already at the scene where the brave firefighter lay. Time slipped through my fingers like grains of sand, but as the medics began to work, the energy around me flickered, charged with an unseen current. Holding on to Jenna's reassuring presence, I stepped forward, the tide of humanity parting as urgency led me closer. I stuttered, my heart clenching as I took in the desperate gestures of the paramedics, their focus absolute. They moved like dancers on the precipice of life, their training synchronizing with a rhythm that felt both foreign and too intimate. But then, a gasp erupted from the crowd, a sound filled with overwhelming dread, piercing through my veil of hope. I turned to see Mr. Thompson, clenching his fists, face twisted in pain as time bound him to the horror unfolding. Don't you dare, he whispered, fierce protection rivaling grief in his eyes, as though an invisible thread held him shackled to his son's survival. I wanted to reach out, to tell him the indomitable spirit of his son still flickered against the black abyss. But all I could do was nod, feeling that same knot of solidarity tighten within my chest, and in that moment, a surge of dizziness washed over me, the echo of crashing rubble now transformed into a confusing symphony of heartbeats, shouts, pleading prayers. My legs felt heavy as I mustered strength, a longing to connect, to mend the shattered fragments of our existence. But just as suddenly as fear loomed, a remarkable shot of courage flashed through the eyes of another stranger firefighter who had emerged from the throng, his attire soaked and smeared, mirroring the disarray of our lives. He bore the air of a survivor. He's alive! He bellowed, and hope ignited once more. As the news rippled through the crowd, the tension crested like the roar of a tidal wave crashing into a shore ravaged by storms. A moment later, I heard the paramedics shout to push back, and as they moved the debris, it felt like destiny hung precariously in the air. Make way! Let him breathe! They called, their voices laced with raw urgency. There it was again, the flicker on the edge of time as a glimmer of hope ignited within our hearts. But just as quickly, it was extinguished. A distant rumble echoed ominously, like a harbinger of darkness rolling across the horizon. The building groaned in protest, and I felt the ground beneath us tremble, the remnants of shattered dreams reverberating in time with my racing heartbeat. Get back! Someone yelled, fear coating the air, but as I turned toward Mr. Thompson, I realized he was paralyzed, eyes locked onto the movement of the medics like they were the last fragments of everything he had ever cared for. Alex! He shouted, panic surging through the ruins of their connection, and in that heartbeat, I understood what lay ahead could shatter everything even more. The darkness was creeping back, threatening to swallow up all we had fought for. As the tremor escalated, a spine-chilling crack resounded above us, and I glimpsed it, another beam, larger than the last, cascading toward the ground at an unimaginable speed. With a guttural cry, I lunged, the instinct to save arching through every fiber of my being. But time had become an unforgiving adversary. All at once, the world slowed as I prepared to act not just for my own sake but in the ember of hope that we must cling to. But even as I reached out, the very essence of fate seemed to unfold in the wake of uncertainty, drawing us toward an unseen destiny where hope danced precariously on the edge of devastation. In that final instant, locked in defiance against the tide of chaos, the truth settled deep within me. Sometimes, a single moment could yield heartbreak, and sometimes, it could also close the distance between love and loss in a way I never could have imagined. The tremor surged beneath me, a visceral reminder of the precariousness that defined our existence now. The air grew thick with the acrid smell of smoke and the metallic tang of fear, blending into a suffocating veil that wrapped around us. I knew I had to act, not just for Mr. Thompson or Alex, but for everyone tethered by catastrophe here and now. As I lunged forward, I felt the presence of Jenna beside me, her hand gripping my arm, anchoring me amidst the storm of chaos. "We can't let him see this," she cried over the din, but even her voice wavered with uncertainty. I could see it in her eyes, dread and determination locked in an agonizing dance. The beam above us cracked, creating a nearly deafening chorus of despair, an ominous echo that seemed to mock our exhaustion, gnawing at the threads of courage we clung to. I moved instinctually, driven by the raw energy of something greater than myself. "Mr. Thompson," I shouted, my voice barely making it through the deafening noise, "we have to move. Get to safety." But he was still, transfixed by the sight of his son lying beneath the wreckage, an immovable force framed in a world that had turned unimaginable. My heart wrenched at the raw agony etched on his face, the horizon of his hope collapsing like the structure above. Suddenly, the ground quaked with a more profound tremor threatening to dislodge every semblance of resolve. In that brief moment of clarity, I realized, I could let fear paralyze me, but I could also choose to fight, to preserve the remnants of life left among the debris. Through the chaos, I felt the warmth of Jenna's presence as she pressed against my shoulder. "We can do this," she whispered, her gaze unwavering, even as she began to pull Mr. Thompson backward, away from the danger creeping closer. The movement was slow, the weight of hopelessness and sorrow was a palpable anchor. As my heart hammered in sync with the rumbling destruction, I turned my attention away from Mr. Thompson and toward the medics hustling by, their faces etched in focused despair, every ounce of their beings dedicated to saving lives. One of them caught my eye briefly, a young woman with wild hair and determination in her gaze. "Get as many people back as you can," she shouted, urgency threading through her voice. I nodded, willing the ground to stop shifting beneath us, urging Jenna to help me in what felt like a fight against destiny. Yet, in the flicker of those terrifying seconds, something remarkable happened. A figure emerged from the fracturing rubble, staggering forth as if propelled by sheer will. It was the firefighter, battered and bruised, but alive and unyielding. He reached for the medics, his voice hoarse yet commanding, "I can help. I can carry him," every ounce of adrenaline charged through me. This was the moment, the brilliance of a shared fight igniting hope within our desperate hearts. I turned to Mr. Thompson, but his eyes remained shadowed by a tempest of disbelief. "Your son needs you now," I pleaded, desperation lacing my voice, pulling at him as I felt Jenna tugging at my sleeve, urging me to move. Suddenly, amidst the cacophony of chaos, I witnessed a heart-stopping scene unfold. A pair of small hands emerged through a tear in the rubble, reaching for the light. A child's voice called out, trembling and frightened, "Mama, oh God." The realization crashed over me like frigid water. Another soul needed saving, another life barely holding on. For the first time, I saw the enormity of the moment, the web of connections and overlaps that defined this thrumming chaos. What if it was not just about Alex or the firefighter, but about so many others who were lost in this tragedy? "Can you hear me?" I shouted, rushing toward the source of the voice, a mix of adrenaline and fear propelling me forward. "We're coming. Stay with me." I grasped the edges of the rubble, pulling with a fervor, the rocks shifting under the weight of countless lives. With limited time, I glanced back at Jenna, her eyes overwhelmed yet forged with a fierce determination, a soldier navigating the battlefield of devastation. "Help me," I begged, urgency hanging between us like the delicate thread of hope we had been sewing together. As she joined me, we worked in a frenzy, our hands digging and pulling, desperately searching for the child. I knew it was dangerous. Every second spent risked new blessings collapsing like fragile dreams, but in that moment, I clung to that flicker of hope, and then, as the darkness of despair closed around us in a choking embrace, a beam shifted with a thunderous groan, and I could swear fate held its breath. I glanced over just in time to see the firefighter's determined expression for a heartbeat longer, his outstretched arms still beckoning for assistance. Yet, as suddenly as he had stood at the cusp of hope, the ground trembled once more, and the looming beam that had instilled fear suddenly began to topple. "Get back!" I screamed, panic erupting within me, the truth shining with terrifying clarity. We were all running out of time. I felt the ground shake beneath my feet and knew the world as we knew it was about to slip away into darkness. With the fleeting seconds that remained, I was faced with a choice: would I continue chasing after the child's small hand, or try to help the fallen firefighter who had already given so much? Behind that choice hovered the looming specter of heartbreak, a truth I had never imagined would fracture the bonds of bravery. In that heartbeat, I realized how close we were to losing everything, how the thin veil of hope stretched dangerously against the encroaching shadows of despair. And as the beam began its descent, time hung in a disquieting balance, whispering the answer in a language I dared not fully understand. A heavy silence settled in the air as the beam above began its slow, ominous descent, a predator poised to take its prey. My heart raced, each beat heralding the weight of panic swelling within me. I had but seconds to decide, every breath a microcosm of desperation cascading into the void. The child's frightened voice echoed through the chaos, but the firefighter's call for help clung desperately to my conscience, marking my choices as paramount, or perhaps damning: stay here. I urged Jenna, feeling the squeeze of my own courage wane as I darted toward the firefighter, his face a mixture of grit and fading resolve. "You need to hold on. We can't lose you." I wasn't just pleading for him, I was begging for something that called to be Savita, a flicker of hope that had ignited when I first saw him emerge from the rubble. He looked up at me, eyes widening with understanding. "Go. Save the child." A surge of unwavering spirit flowed through his voice, steeling my resolve even further. But his tone also held the weight of sacrifice, and in that cruel minute, I questioned whether escape would feel like my own betrayal. Yet, against the backdrop of eerie stillness, I could hear the muffled whimpering, a melody of despair that poured from somewhere beneath the massive wreckage. I steeled myself, commitment hardening my resolve, a lone candle in the encroaching darkness. "Hold on. I'm coming." My outstretched hand pressed against the remnants of what was once sturdy lath and plaster, splintering beneath my palms as I maneuvered to unearth the frightened child. With every desperate yank of debris, a vision wove in my mind: a mother finding her missing piece, the tender embrace of reunion. As I plunged deeper, panic gnawed at the edges of my heart, but warmth radiated through my veins as Jenna's voice broke through the din: "I'm right behind you. Just keep digging." Just when I thought I'd heard the child's desperate pleas grow faint against the sounds of shifting chaos, my fingers grazed something warm, familiar, alive. I froze, a gut-wrenching dread that this might not end well digging into my soul. "Is someone there?" I called, hoping for an answer that would slice through my anxiety. "Mama!" The cry rang out and struck my core like a bolt of lightning. There was no turning back now. I dug with newfound fury, hands moving in a frantic dance, flesh scraping against splinters, the world above fracturing further as if it were rehearsing for tragedy. "Please, please, please," I murmured fervently, not knowing if I was whispering a prayer or a promise. "You can do this." Then another tremor rocked the ground. I glanced backwards, instinctively seeking Jenna's face for assurance. But what I saw was a tableau of horror. She stood transfixed, eyes widening as fate drew ever closer, the firefighter's body surrounded by limbs of cracked infrastructure. Ignoring the claw of dread gripping my heart, I pulled the child towards me as if we were both tethered by a celestial string, tangible and alive. "I've got you." My voice swelled buoyantly. "You're safe now." With a final heave, I liberated them from the debris, a small bundle of fear and tears, cradled in my arms like the last ember in a dying fire. The moment hung like a breath, a fragile whisper between despair and hope, but that calm was short-lived. The ground beneath us screamed in protest, the firefighter's face twisted in agony as the reality of our choices crashed together. I threw a glance over my shoulder. He was still trapped, and time was withering away like sand through fingers. "Help me." He gasped, his voice raw and urgent, the choking desperation of impending loss pooling around us like a thick fog. I knew that every second counted. A choice dangled precariously like a pendulum swinging to the rhythm of impending disaster. With the child safely in my arms, I hesitated, torn as much by my desire to save this precious life as by my instinct to help, to honor that gleaming spark of nobility burning in the firefighter's gaze. That my world trembled, echoing my inner tumult as time slipped. I was filled with conflicted emotions. Spark of defiance surging against the encroaching black of despair. There was no clear path in this labyrinth of choices. "Jenna!" I called, urgency ringing in my voice. "Get the child to safety, wait." She screamed, but in her eyes, I saw understanding blossom into a fierce determination. In that split second, the air crackled with possibilities. I weighed the weight of hope against the call of inevitability, each heartbeat a scrupulous thread stitching together lives on the brink of unraveling, but fate, it seemed, had woven a tighter net. As I turned to delve back toward the firefighter, another violent tremor rocked the ground, and the beam creaked ominously overhead, threatening to plunge anew into chaos. For an eternal heartbeat, everything stood still as I realized, my heart, though willing, could only carry one of us away from this hell. With an unyielding conviction, I knew there was only one way to break this cycle, a decision that would echo through my soul forever, and then, with the scene suspending in catastrophic beauty, a deafening crack split the air. The beam collapsed, an avalanche of despair burdening my breath, and I was left watching as the fighter's outstretched hand faded into the growing dark. A scream ripped through me as I clutched the child tighter, torn between safety and sacrifice, with every heartbeat laced with the echo of what had just shattered. I had moved towards hope, yet the price was steep as I faced the chasm that opened wide before me, an indelible mark that would redefine me amidst this unfolding nightmare. And as the last remnants of light flickered, the ultimate question rose like a specter from the debris: how much was I willing to lose? The world was a cacophony of pain and confusion as I staggered backward, child cradled in my trembling arms, heart still racing from both fear and the exertion of the rescue. The weight of the firefighter's sacrifice pressed on me like an invisible shackle, holding me captive to the horror of what I had just witnessed. Jenna's voice became a whisper in the storm of my thoughts, a torn echo of urgency that felt worlds away as I stumbled into the light of safety. "Are you okay?" she cried, her eyes scanning for damage, but there was only a newfound fragility in her gaze. I wanted to assure her that everything was fine, but the lump in my throat wouldn't allow it. The child's small body fit against me like a missing puzzle piece, their sobs, wet and desperate, seeped into my skin, reminding me of the tangled web of lives we now strung together. "It's all right, sweetie," I murmured, brushing a strand of hair away from the child's tear-streaked face. "You're safe." Lying was easy when attentive emotion bore no consequence, but how could I guarantee safety when my heart fractured under the gravity of loss? Jenna remained close, her hand trembling as she reached out to touch mine. The connection, though fleeting, sent warmth radiating through the coldness of despair. "We need to talk to someone," she began, but her voice broke, her resolve crumbling beneath the weight of what we had just faced. That I could see dark figures moving closer, firefighters and paramedics swarming to the scene, each a vanguard of hope amidst the wreckage. Yet, they felt like shadows looming over my wounded spirit. I turned my gaze back toward the ruins, my heart churning with the question that gnawed relentlessly: what happens to the ones we couldn't save? As if in response, a paramedic approached, his expression grave. His words fell like lead, heavy and jarring. "We're working on getting him out," he said, but there was a gravity to his tone, suggestion that spoke of last breaths and bittersweet farewells. Jenna's fingers threaded tightly through mine, a lifeline amid the tumult. "We have to believe he's okay," she insisted, but her voice was fraying at the edge, an echo of disbelief coloring her sentiments. That I wanted to believe it. I wanted it woven into my very being, but the haunting silhouette of the firefighter's outstretched hand remained plastered against my mind, a brutal reminder that I had made a choice. How could I carry that burden and shield the child from its weight? Anxiety quickly turned to panic, drowning the flickers of hope, every breath I took feeling constricted under the circumstances. let's take the child to safety, give them a space to breathe, the paramedic suggested gently, but my feet felt cemented in place, unwilling to move. The shattered pieces of my heart felt fragile, and I didn't want to risk shattering them further. Please, don't leave me, the child whimpered, curling tighter against me, their small arms wrapping around my torso, grounding me amidst the turbulence. I had long been an anchor for others, but in this moment, I was drowning too. That I promise. I pulled the child closer, shielding them while the world pressed in. We're going to get through this together. But I was struggling to breathe, my own words feeling like a poignant lullaby meant to soothe more than them. I was the one fighting against the crashing tides of emotion, and as my thoughts swirled, I glimpsed Jenna as she met my gaze. Just a second, she called out, releasing my hand and stepping forward towards the havoc around us. It felt like the scene stretched into infinity, the ground still shuddering, the sounds of sirens piercing my heart, each second packed with the weight of apprehension. Where are you going? I shouted, wresting myself away from the child's embrace just a fraction too late. Jenna turned her back on me, her desperation emerging like a wildflower through the cracked pavement. I have to know. She called out, retreating into a chaotic scene, leaving me stunned, frozen, caught between the faint flickers of safety and the abyss. Just as she disappeared into the tumult, a new sound invaded the air, a child's laughter that floated like a feather through the chaos. I turned my gaze toward the source, bewildered, the warmth of that innocent joy lighting a small spark in the shroud of despair enveloping me. Was it possible to be innocent within this man-made tempest? Then, moments later, a tiny hand gripped my sleeve. Another child, seemingly untouched by the disaster, appeared before me, bright-eyed and radiant with purity. Confusion flickered across their face, curiosity glinting in their eyes as they stared up at me, innocence clashing with the gravity of the moment. That I am not scared. Are you? They asked with a bright, unwavering smile that felt like sunlight at dawn, startling the shadows. The audacity of their spirit overwhelmed me in a rush of bittersweet warmth. My voice faltered, uncertainty splayed between hope and despair. Welling emotions surged forth, I was unclear whether to cry for the lives lost or laugh for those remaining. Just then, the rubble shifted ominously, and a cheerless cry pierced through the air, a sound that echoed off structures that had once been strong, now reduced to fractured remains. My gut twisted involuntarily. It was the paramedic, his hoarse voice laced with an ominous dread. We need to evacuate. Now. And then suddenly, my chest tightened, the fleeting moment of joy disappeared into the shadows as I found myself caught in a whirlpool of choices, a new decision that could shift the entire landscape of my heart again. Stay here, I murmured to the child, their small forms seemingly oblivious to the danger that lurked just beyond the veil of vibrancy. But uncertainty gnawed at me, and doubt billowed inward like a storm gathering strength. Jenna's absence echoed, a wrenching reminder that life was full of sacrifices, and I couldn't help but wonder if it was time to finally confront the massive void left behind by the price of hope. As I prepared myself to break toward the darkness seeking Jenna, a figure emerged from the shadows, a silhouette against the crumbling ruin, relief and anguish mingling in their stance. My breath caught as my heart thundered against the cage of my ribs. Could it be? But the figure stepped forward, revealing itself against the backdrop of unimaginable dread, the fleeting gleam of recognition striking me with impossible force. Please, tell me she's safe. They called out, panic braided into the fabric of their tone, and the realization struck like a lightning bolt. I had yet to consider the cost of my choices. Every second spiraled with the weight of epiphany, the cycle of loss spiraled tighter around me. And as the shadows encroached, I was left with an unshakable truth: I had not just lost a firefighter, I might lose someone far more integral to my heart. The weight of full circle truth beckoned, and with it came the inescapable question: what sacrifices would I make when protecting those I loved? And in that moment, the horizon shimmered with uncertainty, cliffhangers crudely etched into the fabric of my new reality as I stood poised on the precipice of the ultimate revelation. The flickering lights of a chaotic scene filtered through the haze of swirling smoke, and despite the earthquake of emotion beneath, I was momentarily struck by clarity amid the maelstrom. I had raced towards the fire, driven by a desperate urge to protect lives, yet my heart was in fragments now, straining against the weight of loss intertwined with remnants of hope. I could scarcely comprehend the cost of each decision I had made. Jenna reappeared by my side, her face streaked with soot and a sheen of worry. "I couldn't find him," she gasped, eyes scanning the chaos for any sign of that fallen firefighter, the embodiment of courage. In that moment, her spirit felt etched with trepidation, and I wanted nothing more than to assure her that it would all be all right, but the truth anchored heavy on my lips. I clutched the child cradled against my chest, a living reminder of innocent love suspended between burgeoning life and unyielding tragedy. "That I can't lose anyone else," I murmured, my voice trembling, and I could see the flicker of understanding flicker within Jenna's eyes. Both of us had felt the cruel bite of loss twist through our lives, and here, in the shadow of destruction, we stood faced with a grim reality that the universe had cast us into. The paramedics scrambled around us like a relentless tide, each shout of urgency punctuating the air with a rawness I could almost taste. "We need to evacuate all civilians now," one called, and I felt a sense of despair washing over me, threatening to swamp the fragile hope I had threaded together throughout this ordeal. The child clung tighter to me, their small hands gripping my shirt. "Are we going home?" they asked, innocence shining through the storm of grief. Home. That elusive word tugged at the essence of my heart, unraveling every thought I had submerged beneath survival instincts. How could I focus on safety when there was chaos all around? Just then, there was another shuddering crash, and I felt my resolve harden. For every innocent life I could save, it became imperative that I faced the stark truth, that I could not leave behind those who depended on courage to pull them through. "We need to move," I shouted, pushing through the crowd with determined strides, forcing Jenna to sway around me as we navigated the wreckage. "We need to find everyone and get them to safety." But as we reached the edge of the debris field, the flame-lit darkness brought a stunning realization. Another child emerged into sight, someone I had not seen before, framed within the chaos like a beacon of vulnerability. In that moment, as my heart anchored deeper into the need to protect, I wrestled with an undeniable truth. The firefighter had made a choice that had not shattered him alone. It echoed into the lives of those he fought for, and so too would my actions echo through this night. "Please," I whispered to Jenna, desperation twisting my features. "Help the children to safety. I need to find him." She hesitated, searching my eyes for affirmation, but I pushed forward, urgency driving me into the heart of darkness where lives dangled. The flames flickered, casting monstrous shadows that danced across the crumpling walls. Every breath I took felt weighted, filled with memories and emotions swirling in a tempest. I was not just a waiter, I was woven into the tapestry of countless stories, faceless lives forever changed by this moment. That I and the ruins of the restaurant where laughter had once thrived. I tore further into the debris, fingers digging through ash and destruction, the wound of loss festering at the edges of my soul. "Anyone? Is anyone here?" I called, desperation lifting my voice over the crackling sounds around me, and then I heard a muffled sound, something that clawed at the frayed edges of hope, the desperate cry of a soul caught in the tempest. "Help!" My heart surged as I followed the echo, pushing aside pieces of shattered dreams that obscured the path. As I drew closer, the murmur morphed into a distinct voice drifting through the air, one I recognized like a familiar song. "The firefighter, come closer," I urged, my shoulders straining as I unearthed the last remnants of independence like pieces of a puzzle breaking rapidly apart. "Hold on, I'm here." His face emerged from beneath the rubble, revealed against the shambles of hope and despair. He looked weary but fiercely resolute. I kneeled beside him, the heat of the fire against my back a stark contrast to the frigid pulse of uncertainty coursing through me. "I'm going to get you out," I promised. "Get the others to safety first." "Please," he gasped, his breath rasping, eyes wide with fear but tethered to courage. "There are still people in the back." In that dauntless moment, the world around me faded away, the smoky chaos settling into silence as the weight of his sacrifice pressed like an anchor. What would I choose to uphold this fragile desire to rescue him, or to heed the call of lives still ensnared in the flames? Tears rimmed my eyes, the sacrifice laid before me illuminating what truly mattered: love, connection, the threads that weave us into a shared humanity amidst the wreckage. I turned toward the light of the exit, my mind accelerating faster than the dark. There were others, and the truth of those bonds surged with each heartbeat. "He'll go, but he'll be back," I vowed, clenching his shoulder, seeing the flicker of warmth and bravery shining through the fatigue. You will come with me. As I hurried back into the chaos, Jenna met my eyes, her gaze a tapestry of concern and relief as she placed a small hand on my arm. In that fleeting moment, the strength of what we fought for glimmered like an unbroken thread. He's alive, I breathed, the relief spilling over like embers against soot-stained memories. But we need to move fast. There's another child in there. Jenna exclaimed, urgency swallowing her frame. In that very breath, the motivation surged into my veins, uniting us as we rushed through the blockade of Normal's a frantic race to save those whose lives had woven into the fabric of our own. Together, carrying the enormity of loss and love intertwined, we surged through the chaos, hearts drumming as we moved toward the light that promised salvation. And in that moment of chaos, everything felt singular, a purpose shared between us, an electrifying bond illuminating the shadows of uncertainty that had plagued the night that we reached the last remnants of safety, the feeling dancing through my skin like an electric tide. There was hope yet, flickering but undeniable. The foundations of relationships woven amidst the cries of those who needed saving sparked anew, resistant against the tendrils of despair that lingered too closely. As we emerged, the sun peeked over the horizon. The light cast a soft glow across the devastation like a tender caress lingering over broken bones. My heart, once burdened with loss, began to pulse with understanding. "I'll go back for him," I murmured to Jenna, the urge undeniable. "Promise," she insisted, her voice shaking with unfathomable strength and gentleness. With a firm nod, I turned toward the darkness where courage and sacrifice woven through chaos laid bare my calling. Beneath layers of ash and unrevealed hope, I felt the beating heart of salvation within me. In this journey, this unwavering storm of love and desperation, I found myself navigating a world that had redefined me completely. And as I pushed back into the fire, the light of survival became my guiding star. What I learned was imprinted within the marrow of my bones. I was never just a waiter or a faceless observer stitched within the tapestry of someone else's life. I was part of an unbreakable chain, tethered to love that transcended shadows and sorrow. And as I asphalted back toward the blaze, the only thought echoing in my heart was this: we are all deserving of redemption, each pulse a reminder that love endures. Beyond the ashes, it will rise, relentless and mighty, like a phoenix from the depths of despair, illuminating the dark with an inexhaustible brilliance. Your lives matter, I shouted as I pushed through smoke and chaos. I'll get you home. Every bit of struggle, every shred of grief blended with hope, surged anew, filling the air with renewed vigor. I will face the flames to seize the warmth of love, awaiting answers hidden within the depths, igniting a flicker of invincible resilience that might finally, at last, guide us all back to the light.